Outcomes Advanced Workbook by Carol Nuttall and Amanda French. Published by National Geographic Learning, part of Cengage Learning. Copyright 2017.
1.1
OK, so next up we're looking at student life in the city. First, I'd like to welcome two international students to the studio, Aytak from Turkey and Eileen from Canada.
Hello.
Hi.
So, Aytak, how do you like the city? A bit chilly, eh?
More than a bit. I can't believe how many people go around in t-shirts. I've been piling on the layers.
So you don't think much of the place then?
Oh no, quite the opposite in fact. The centre's so compact for a start, and there are no cars, so you can walk everywhere.
I agree, yeah, that's a real plus point. And how are you liking it here, Eileen?
Well, personally, I can't get enough of this weather. I'm from Canada, so to me this is mild. But I agree with Aytak about the pedestrian zone. I really enjoy shopping on the high street, but...
Go on, we can take a bit of criticism.
Yes, well, once you get out into the suburbs, it's not so nice. Some parts are filthy, actually. There's lots of litter.
Oh, you'd hardly notice it. My hometown's in a hot, dry part of the country, so there's a lot of dust and sand everywhere. To me, this place is practically spotless.
What about the locals? How are you getting on with them?
It was tough at first, just to understand anyone. The thing is, I reckon my English is quite good.
It's excellent.
Thanks. But when I first came here, I felt like a beginner again. Everyone talks so fast.
Even I struggle to make out what people are saying sometimes. So you must have found it impossible, Aytak.
Yeah, although I'm getting better now. Luckily, most people have been really helpful.
Most people?
Well, a couple of times I've had some hassle. Just teasing, really, no big deal. In general, everyone's been really welcoming.
Good to hear it. What are your thoughts, Eileen? Are we a friendly bunch, or...?
Oh, totally. And I've been amazed by the way people go out of their way to help you. In my first week, I asked this lady for directions. She actually walked me all the way to where I wanted to go, because she said some places could be dangerous if you didn't know your way around.
I've never felt in any danger.
Crime's a bit of a problem, I think, especially in some of the more deprived areas. You've got to take care.
Yes, just like in a lot of big cities, I think.
Yeah.
Oops, we're running out of time. So, one last question. What about the nightlife, guys?
Yeah, wild. I mean, some clubs are really buzzing.
Clubbing isn't really my thing, so I can't comment on that. I've been impressed by the restaurants, though.
All good stuff. Thanks, both of you. We're going to take a little break now and...
1.2 1
I swear the shop was filthy inside.
2
The woman in the baker's was incredibly helpful.
3
Honestly, the stench was unbearable.
4
It was really, really great to see you again.
5
Seriously, he drove like crazy to get here.
6
Getting across town was a nightmare.
2.1 Speaker 1
At work, the relationship has to remain professional. There's no room for domestic quarrels. I think, first off, establishing clearly defined roles is vital. Of the two of us, Tony's more of a people person, so he's the one who tends to deal with clients. On the other hand, he's absent-minded about admin, so I run the organisational side of things. We meet in the office at the end of the day to address any problems there and then. We don't take anything home with us. Then 3 times a week we go to separate gyms after work. Sometimes you just need to get away from each other for a bit. We try hard to set boundaries and strike a balance. Going away together on vacation was a major problem in the beginning, because there were just the two of us and we couldn't leave the office unstaffed. This caused arguments and put a strain on our relationship, even though we'd been married for years. I almost walked out, it was so bad. But now, we close the office for 10 days every August. You can overcome any challenge if you put your mind to it.
Speaker 2.
Work out our differences. You must be joking. I'll never work with him again. You know, I thought I could trust him. I mean, he's family, right? But I should have known. He was like that at school, always vying for attention, always had to be the best. Dad used to try and be fair to us both, but it didn't make any difference. Anyway, I thought we got over that, and when we first started working together, it was fine. For a while. I think he's actually a pretty good salesman, and said so. But it turns out the feeling wasn't mutual. He was soon up to his old tricks again, always criticising my work, making bitchy remarks. To make things worse, it turned out he'd also been stealing my clients behind my back. I complained, of course, but nothing came of it. So, I quit. Some problems just can't be fixed.
Speaker 3.
Nan's getting on a bit now, but it still amazes me how fresh her art seems. You wouldn't know we were 2 generations apart. Her illustrations for each book have a youthfulness that I find inspiring, and she always seems to capture the images I have in my mind. But then it was her pictures that inspired me to write in the first place, after all. She says my stories inspire her to paint too, which is nice. The main hurdle we had to overcome was being able to accept each other's comments. It all felt too personal. After all, I could still remember sitting on her knee when I was a kid. But we got over it eventually. We had to. And actually, having someone who can review your work constructively is incredibly useful, even if sometimes you end up agreeing to disagree. Luckily, we're both usually fairly easygoing, laid-back kind of people, so we haven't had too many major dramas.
.2 1.
I'd have thought you'd have been delighted.
2.
He'll have finished it by tomorrow.
3.
She said there'd be rain later, but I don't know if there will.
4.
She couldn't have known who'd be there.
5.
I wouldn't have helped you even if I could.
6.
These are mine, but I don't know whose those are.
3.1. Speaker 1.
One of my favorite national celebrations is Martisor. It's celebrated in Romania and Moldova in early March to welcome the end of winter. It's a very old tradition, possibly even pre-Christian, I think largely without religious connotations now anyway. Adults give each other inexpensive, often handmade bows or bracelets made from interwoven red and white strings or ribbons. The 2 strands are supposed to symbolize winter and summer and the relationship between men and women. If you wear one, it's supposed to bring you good fortune. These bows, called martisors, are worn for 9 days. If someone gives you a martisor, you have to choose one of these 9 days. If it's mild and warm on the day you picked, then you'll have a wonderful year ahead. Unfortunately, I always seem to pick a day that pours.
Speaker 2.
Schellendermarz is a Swiss festival. Its name means the 1st of March. It's held in the Engadine Valley region, near where I grew up. We used to celebrate it every year, although I don't know how authentic it is. Apparently, there aren't any records from before the last century, so I suspect it's a relatively recent custom. Anyway, it's certainly a very picturesque one, and tourists love it. All the local boys dress up in blue shirts and red scarves and hang cowbells round their waists. You should see the size of some of them. I don't know how the younger boys manage to carry them. They march through the town, ringing the bells, and people give them sweets and cakes and sometimes a small amount of money. Last year, we gave them hot chocolate too because it was freezing. The bells act as a blessing. According to folklore, any evil spirits are driven out by the sound. And believe me, by the end of the day, you'll be desperate for some peace and quiet too.
Speaker 3.
A couple of years ago, I visited my friend Yoko in Japan, and she took me to the Hinamatsuri festival at the Kada Shrine. It was amazing. This ornate temple was filled with thousands of dolls and figurines from all over Japan. It's a centuries-old tradition from way back in the Heian period. The dolls are believed to bring happiness and prosperity to young girls. The dolls can cost families a small fortune. Parents really go to town to get their daughters the best. People visit the temple in their finest, most colourful clothes, and they give offerings to the gods. Many people bring peach blossom because the festival is held at the time the tree comes into bloom and the warmer weather begins. There's an elaborate ceremony with priests and children praying and singing songs for the dolls. It's really quite beautiful, such a lovely sound. Then they load them all onto little boats and send them out to sea, taking all the girls' bad luck with them. It's a breathtaking sight.
(3.2)
It's important to respect religious beliefs.
Yes, I think that's essential.
We should teach religion in schools.
Oh, I don't know about that.
(4.1) 1.
Charisma. Charming. Change. Charitable.
2.
Compassion. Ruthlessness. Pressure. Obsession.
3.
Wisdom. Pleasant. Hasty. Disaster.
4.
Machine. Charming. Brochure. Chef.
5.
Nature. Downturn. Statue. Fortunate.
6.
Possessive. Issue. Dissolve. Scissors.
(4.2)
Hello, and welcome to World Watch, our weekly look at issues shaping the world today. This week we're joining a debate which has risen to the top of the political agenda recently. The loss of plant and animal species around the globe is a growing concern. But what are governments really doing about the problems? And how will it affect us all, from the rich Western civilizations to the poorest countries in the Third World?
(4.3)
Now, I'm going to ask an obvious question. Several of the more right-wing ministers have suggested that the problem of loss of biodiversity is being over-exaggerated, while environmental scientists claim the issue's still being underestimated. Who's right?
Well, who do you think? Solving issues such as global warming and biodiversity loss will be expensive, but that's not what concerns me the most. We have to act now, not because what's happening is terribly sad, that's a given, but because it's irreversible. Once biodiversity has been lost, it's gone forever. This issue is about as serious as can be.
So, what should we do, Sarah? Forgive me, I don't doubt your sincerity. It's your idealism that worries me. Are you suggesting we abandon our way of life and go back to living in huts?
No, of course not. However, drastic action is needed. Yes, I agree with that.
I think I'll step in here if I may. Although I started out as a scientist, I'm now a politician, and I like to think I'm also a pragmatist too. And I think we need to address this issue realistically.
Slowly, you mean, Lyle?
Maybe, if necessary. I totally agree with you, Sarah, that we need to develop environmentally friendly policies. The issue for me is whether we'd be sacrificing the economy in favour of wildlife.
But we can help both. In Brazil, for example, a group of farmers in the Amazon basin are currently planting an endangered species of wild cassava. As well as helping the plant, sales of the crop have also provided money for a hospital, new housing, and there's a school planned for next year. This, in turn, has given them a means to survive as they make money out of the crops. I'm totally in favour of initiatives like these.
Well, I don't know. That might work in the Amazon, but what could be done about farming in Europe? Despite being wealthy, these countries are also very heavily populated. The situation there is rather different.
That's why we've got to look at the issue globally. For me, the problem of biodiversity loss ranks alongside healthcare and defence in terms of seriousness, and way above local politics. We urgently need policymakers such as yourself to get together for some joined-up thinking and make...
(5.1) 1.
You must be getting quite good at it.
2.
It must have been amazing.
3.
I bet that was awful.
4.
I imagine she was quite relieved.
5.
I bet she was mortified.
6.
You must be getting pretty tired of it.
5.2 Conversation 1.
Hi, Amy. Goodness, you look awful. What have you been up to? Not another party again?
Oh, Ian, hi. No, I haven't been to one for ages. Actually, I had a night in. But I sat up till 4 playing World of Warcraft.
You? Playing World of Warcraft? Till 4? I bet you're feeling a bit rough then.
I am a bit, yeah.
I haven't played it yet, but I've heard it's really cool. But I didn't think you were into that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, I'd seen the adverts and they didn't really appeal. All those silly avatars, like something from Harry Potter. It was Mike who put me onto it, really. He'd been raving about it for months, and eventually I just gave in.
So, how did you rate it?
Oh, to be honest, I felt it didn't live up to the hype. I mean, I'd heard that the gameplay was pretty awesome, but the interface was really complicated, and I was a bit overwhelmed by it all.
I wouldn't mind giving it a try.
Well, I can lend it to you if you like. Only not tonight. I was wondering about giving it another go, just to be fair. And then I'll quit, and it's all yours. I've done my last all-nighter.
Conversation 2.
So, John, don't you hit the town on Fridays anymore then?
Not as a rule. Now and again, but I've usually got other plans.
Such as?
Well, a group of us have set up this film club. We take it in turns to meet at each other's houses. Someone sorts the food, someone brings the wine, and we're all set.
And you do that every Friday?
Pretty much.
You must get fed up of it sometimes, though. I mean, doesn't it get boring doing the same thing all the time?
Not at all. It's great. Well, it's hard to beat the big screen at the cinema, but we more than make up for it with a great atmosphere. Oh, and saving on cost.
Yeah. What got you started on that then?
Well, we'd been talking about it for a while. Then Joanne got made redundant and we thought it would be a great way to cheer her up.
So what kind of films do you watch?
All sorts. The first time we did it, we chose a comedy with what's her name in it? You know, the English actress with the posh name.
Do you mean Helena Bonham Carter?
That's her. I can't remember the name of the film, but it was hilarious. And we were in stitches for most of the evening. Comedies aren't usually my sort of thing, but that's the great thing about this club. It broadens your mind. We've seen thrillers, horror flicks. I can't get enough of them. Even romances. Although I'm not so keen on those.
Sounds interesting. Well, perhaps I'll come and join you one Friday then.
Sure, yeah. Why not?
(6.1) Speaker 1.
That reminds me of the time when Carolyn, our old boss, had gone on maternity leave and they'd hired this new guy, Mark, to take over. He was pretty efficient, I guess, but, well, it took about a week for office morale to go right down. He was just blatantly rude to people, even though he had a good team working for him. One day we had a meeting, and I put an idea forward that I'd had, something I'd been working on for a while, and he just shot it down, like it was nothing. He said something sarcastic like, "So how much money do you want the company to lose, Simon?" Hilarious. I couldn't believe he'd just spoken to me like that, in front of everyone. I didn't want to say something I'd regret, so I just sat there, glaring for the rest of the meeting, refusing to participate. At the end, I spoke to him about it, but it didn't get me anywhere. It was a relief when Carolyn came back, I can tell you.
Speaker 2.
A few years ago, I had a particularly unprofessional moment. You know, in my line of work, you're supposed to remain calm, no matter who your guest is or what they do. You can ask provocative questions, sure, but start a full-blown row? No. But when the Minister for Health came on, I just lost it. I started off fairly calm. I asked him to explain what had happened to the promises that had been made in the election campaign. He sort of made a joke and started evading the question, as they do. So I asked him again, why aren't you doing the things you committed to when you wanted our votes? And he started talking about making efficiency savings, improving procedures, until I couldn't take any more. I suppose the topic was highly personal for me because my sister's a doctor, and I knew how many hours she was putting in, permanently exhausted she was. Anyway, within minutes, I'd basically accused him of lying. And he, quite understandably, got angry with me, and I retaliated. Both of us were literally shouting at one another. I could see my producer going white in horror. But somehow, I couldn't stop myself. I refused to apologise, and we haven't spoken since.
Speaker 3.
Annie? Yes, I know her. She's in my tutorial group. We talk every now and again, but we don't always see eye to eye on things. Last seminar, she mentioned she was looking for a part-time job so she could pay off some of her student loan. And I mentioned that the government was thinking about increasing the minimum wage, which I thought she'd be happy about. But no, she went on about how this meant that employers would cut costs by cutting back on the number of people they hired, including her. Actually, her attitude irritated me, because she was just thinking of herself as usual. I mean, she's never been lazy, I'll give her that, but she's from a very wealthy background. It isn't the same for her. If you're a father trying to raise a family, you just can't do it on that kind of income. Anyway, in the end, I just gave in. I see your point, I said. Well, I couldn't be bothered to argue anymore.
6.2.
S. Receive. Ceasefire. Associated. K. Careful. Nuclear. Casualty. J. Intelligent. Rage. Legitimate. G. Go. Negotiation. Agreement.
7.1. 1.
Why on earth do you want to do that?
2.
Believe me, you're making a mistake.
3.
On the whole, it went very well.
4.
It was a disaster to say the least.
5.
What in the world were you thinking of?
6.
Funnily enough, the experiment was unsuccessful.
Seven 7.2.
Please welcome one of the founding members of Hear It, Dr. André Vermeulen.
Thank you, Professor. For those of you who may not be familiar with Hear It, it's a charity based in Brussels which aims to raise public awareness of hearing impairment. I should make it clear that I'm in the hearing aid business myself, but I take a purely administrative role in the website to avoid bias. Now, to begin, can you all hear me?
7.3.
In the mid-90s, there were 400 million hearing-impaired people globally, of which 70 million belonged to the 700 million-strong European population, and 25 million to the 300 million people in North America. The European figures are thought to rise to 95 million within the next decade. Remarkably, only 1 in 5 hearing-impaired Europeans uses an aid. There are a number of reasons for this. People may underestimate the severity of their own problem, or they worry that aids will look ugly. This is the biggest issue for newer generations, or perhaps they simply don't realize that help is available. Hear It runs an international website that aims to increase public awareness of hearing problems and help those who need it. We regularly publish articles about new products and allow users to post their own comments about equipment they've used. We also give directions to online shops where people can purchase the products. The main message we try to convey is that, in most cases, problems can be improved by the right equipment. Let me tell you about Ashkan Tirani, an Iranian engineer. Ashkan suffered his hearing loss in silence for many years. After coming across our website, he realized it didn't have to be that way. Now, fully kitted out in the latest aids, fitted with Wi-Fi technology, Ashkan not only works in engineering, but also teaches in the subject. And his confidence has taken off too. Obviously, we can't work miracles. Ashkan needs to use special recording equipment and transmitters in lectures. But this is a comparatively small inconvenience when compared to the gains. You can read more about Ashkan on our homepage. His story is quite inspiring. Of course, scientists are making breakthroughs in the field of hearing all the time. If you visit our site, you can read about some fascinating new developments in America. There, scientists have discovered that our skin also helps us to listen by picking up vibrations in sounds. They realized that the full listening process actually involves sight and touch as well as hearing, in order to provide the brain with a full impression of what sounds are being produced. So, in the future, we may be able to look forward to a very different range of products developed in response to these findings. This is just a small selection of the kind of information you can find on our site. It's likely that either you or someone close to you will experience hearing loss at some point, so I'm sure you'll find it an invaluable resource. Now, if I may take a few questions.
8.1.
Monique, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to fit us in. How's it going?
Pretty good. I mean, I just got in from Venezuela yesterday, so there's a bit of jet lag, but, raring to go for the next climb.
Great. So, for anyone thinking about getting into rock climbing, how do you start? I mean, how did you get into it?
Well, my secondary school ran these extracurricular clubs. There was football, climbing, music, I forget. Anyway, most of my friends were keen on footy, so they all opted for that and tried to persuade me too. I loved football, but there was something about rock climbing. I knew I'd have to work at it, that it'd take me out of my comfort zone, and that really appealed. I gave it a go and took to it straight away. The guys training us noticed I seemed to have some natural talent. They put me in for the junior nationals and it all took off from there.
And you've been winning world-class competitions ever since.
Yeah, well, sometimes. Actually, for me, and probably most other climbers, even when you're not trying to beat someone else, you're trying to beat yourself, do it faster, better. So the element of competition is permanently there.
And what about your training schedule?
Well, I train for at least 20 hours a week, often more. Living where I do, near the mountains, it means the training is largely outdoors. There are times when I use the climbing wall, though, when the weather's dreadful.
You're an inspiring figure.
Oh.
No, really, tell me, why does climbing have a particular draw for women?
Well, with rock climbing, you're not depending so much on upper body strength, where men usually have the advantage. It's more to do with stamina, how long you can push yourself for. And I think endurance is something we naturally do better.
And have you ever noticed any prejudice for male climbers?
Hardly any. Although, sure, there are exceptions, macho idiots. I always enjoy overtaking them. Honestly, though, most serious climbers know what it takes and respect other climbers, whoever they are. Gender doesn't come into it.
Will there come a point where you think, OK, I've accomplished it all, I can slow down now?
I hope not. Look, Lynn Hill, the rock climbing pioneer, she was still setting new records in her 40s.
Wow.
And I intend to do the same when I'm that age. Just get better and better.
So, what's next?
For the moment, I'm focused on doing climbs that are completely unfamiliar. Plenty of time to come back and work on improving my time on old climbs later. I'm headed to Austria next week to do some on-sighting there.
Sorry?
On-sighting, that's climbing rocks without inspecting them in advance.
All right.
I'm really looking forward to
it. 8.2. 1.
The mountains are awesome, they really are.
2.
It's normally safe, but sometimes problems do occur.
3.
Did you see James? Was he on the tour?
He was, but she wasn't.
4.
The scenery can be stunning, it really can.
5.
You're not well, are you?
9.1. Speaker 1.
When I graduated, I found it difficult to get a job, so I started experimenting with ideas I'd had while studying. Having studied industrial design, I was interested in designing something that would be useful to industry without harming the environment. I was on my way to a job interview and was walking along a crowded street when I began thinking about the amount of energy created by people walking every day. What if we could harness at least some of that energy and use it? This led to experiments with various ideas for controlling and using energy created by everyday human activity, such as workouts in a gym. The challenge was being able to store such energy. I found a way to do this with special batteries. Then I had to patent my design. This was a long process, and I wish I'd set it in motion earlier. Funding was another problem. Fortunately, a friend who's a marketing consultant gave me advice on how to sell my ideas. This is really important when you're just starting out. It's still early days yet, but I've been receiving a lot of interest from a number of shopping centres, schools and gyms.
Speaker 2.
When this recession hit, almost everyone around me started talking of growing their own vegetables to save money. So, I decided to create gardening products that were environmentally friendly and ethically produced. One of the difficulties was funding. I experimented in my garden shed to cut down on costs and tried to use recycled waste products. I succeeded in ways I never imagined. One of my most successful innovations has been my insect repellent, which contains a secret ingredient from recycled food material. After experimenting, I patented my product so that no one would be able to copy my ideas. Within weeks, I was selling it on the market. It became popular surprisingly quickly, and I suddenly found myself snowed under with orders. My admin skills aren't great, so I had to employ someone to organise files and process orders and deal with the accounts. I worried over this decision for a while, as I wondered whether I'd have enough work to pay them. But in fact, it was the best thing I did. I was able to look more professional to potential customers, and I mean, well, Lucy's great, and I couldn't do without her now. If I'm honest, she's helped to generate business and keep us going.
Speaker 3.
About a year ago, I lost my job, and I realized I'd have to find alternative ways to make money. I'd begun recycling some of my clothes, partly out of interest and partly to avoid splashing out on new ones. It was fun, and several people remarked on how cool my creations looked. One even suggested I set up a business making ethical fashion, and the idea kind of stuck in my head. The thing was to design a series of outfits as a kind of rudimentary collection, then think of a catchy brand name so it would stand out. Once I'd put together a few ideas, I went to a professional for advice on making a business plan. Believe me, money well spent. And then designed my website. Your website is like your shop window. Presentation is everything. My artistic background helped here, and I concentrated on visual impact with minimal text. And well, things suddenly took off. I'm working on some new designs now, and I'm looking for an assistant to help me.
(9.2) 1.
It was quite nice there.
2.
His behaviour was out of order.
Quite.
3.
Have you quite finished? I've had enough of your attitude.
4.
This new product's quite amazing.
5.
It was an inspiring performance.
Quite. 6.
The presentation was quite interesting, if you like that sort of thing.
10.1.
OK, we've got Iris from Christchurch on the phone. Iris?
Good morning, Steve. Look,
The thing is, people think that hospitals are there to fix every single thing that's wrong with them. But come on, there are limits. And anyway, hospitals just don't have the funding.
I'm with you on that. But isn't that where private healthcare comes in? Other countries encourage it. Why shouldn't we?
Absolutely. Paying for healthcare ought to be compulsory, I think.
Now, if that happened, there might be more to spare in the budget for a pay rise for nurses. They deserve it, don't you reckon?
Well, nursing is supposed to be a vocational job, isn't it? Not a way to make a fortune. They earn enough for a decent standard of living. Actually, one more point, if I may.
Go on.
If the government really wants to cut costs, they should make smokers responsible for their own hospital bills. I mean, it costs the country millions to look after them.
Yeah, I see your point, Iris. But if you're talking about people deliberately putting themselves at risk, then you've got to include anyone that plays sport, anyone working with dangerous machinery. I don't know where you draw the line. Anyway, Iris, you've certainly given us food for thought. Thank you. Right, I think we've got Brett from Mount Roskill waiting to talk to us.
Yep. Hello?
How are you, Brett?
Well, better than I was a few weeks ago.
What happened?
Well, I went to my local doctor, still only in his 20s.
Not that that makes any difference.
Oh, I think it does. So anyway, I told him my symptoms, and he said it was nothing to worry about. Well, I sort of thought to myself, what does he know? He's fresh out of medical school. So I went up to the hospital, because I thought it would be good to get a second opinion.
Well, that's often a sensible idea.
And you know what? It was a good thing I did, because it turned out it was serious. Anyway, the hospital doctors sorted me out, and I'm still here thanks to them.
Oh, glad to hear it.
But some of the hospital policies...
Yeah?
Well, I was in a ward, recovering, and what you want is some peace. But no, all these relatives come in and the noise is just terrible. It should be 2 visitors maximum per day.
Yeah, but if Dad's brought the kids to see Mum, you can't just leave some of them in the car. And it's a cultural thing too for some communities. Coming along to the hospital shows a bit of respect.
But not to the other patients.
Clearly a sore point for you, Brett. But, how about the grub? I went to see an uncle of mine recently, and I have to say, the meals they served up looked pretty appetising.
Well, all I can say is I came out a lot thinner than I went in. Hospital catering is years behind the times, if you ask me.
All right, Brett. Thanks for calling.
Cheers.
(10.2) 1.
He saw his old doctor.
2.
I don't know why he felt unwell.
3.
You shouldn't have ignored your injury.
4. I think it was some kind of natural medicine. 5.
The doctor asked me to get dressed again.
6. He could have picked up the disease on holiday. 7.
I was put on a waiting list for my heart operation.
(11.1) Speaker 1.
If you want to be on the podium, you have to give it everything you've got. That means being physically fit. There's a lot of time in the gym and practicing out there on the circuit. Saying that, of course, it's not just my performance, but the car's that's under test. And the responsibility there is the crew's, of course. It's also a matter of experience. A lot of the new guys know that if they don't get points, their contracts won't get renewed. So they feel obliged to take ridiculous chances to get the edge. That's when you'll see them spinning out of control and taking other drivers out with them.
Speaker 2.
Most of the people coming in are older players. Sport's perfectly safe, but you've got to be careful. And they don't make allowances for their age. They think it's just a matter of me prescribing painkillers, but it takes much longer for them to get over injuries than younger players. Oh well, I have to admit to being fairly passive myself. I watch the odd game, but not so much now. It's all about the transfer fees these days. When I was young, a player was with a team for pretty much his whole career. But now the money's just too tempting. It's lost its shine for me. There's no player today who really stands out, keeps the fans on the edge of their seats.
Speaker 3.
I've been doing this job for over 20 years, and the game's changed, I can tell you. I've always had to put up with abuse from the crowd, but these days the players have a go at you too. They've played for a season, and they think they know it all. But there are very few times my decision hasn't been upheld. Since football became the #1 TV sport, egos have grown. Players are only partly in it for the game, and the rest is all about the media attention. They spend lots of time on their appearance and making sure they get their photos taken in the right clubs. Pathetic.
Speaker 4. Well, I often work with a person for a year, sometimes longer, until they've got to the point where they can train independently. That's not to say that we don't get some who are back 6 months later, needing a bit of help sticking to the routines. That's where I come in. I never give up. Anyway, we've often got the sports channel on while people are working out, and it amazes me the range of events you can see nowadays. When I was a kid, it was fairly limited. Now it's stuff like skateboarding, windsurfing. It makes for exciting viewing, which is great. I think a lot more people are drawn to it, to sport generally. Speaker 5.
In my day, we got the adulation of the fans, but not the earnings players do nowadays. After I got out of it, I couldn't trade on my looks or celebrity. I wish. I have to say, I wouldn't have minded that kind of money, but I've done all right for myself. One of the things I've always liked about the game is that it doesn't favour the privileged. A kid just needs to know how to kick a ball and get a bit of a lucky break. If he's spotted by a talent scout, then that's it, he's made. I think the same goes for other sports. Your natural talent and determination can open up the world.
.2 Bluff. Tough. Coach. Show. Court. Pawn. Down. Ground. Cushion. Football. Hurdle. World. .1
So, Penelope, how difficult is it to get started?
Well, the golden rule when choosing your subject is to find them fascinating. Never mind whether they're historically important or, much worse, fashionable. Then concentrate on the key moments in their life and begin your research by focusing on the details surrounding them. Remember, you've got to win the reader over too, and the scandalous and shocking will attract more than the everyday.
What about when the subject's a famous historical figure? Isn't there a danger that it's all been written already?
The trick there is to uncover new information or to approach your subject from an original angle. Otherwise, your book will only be of interest to academics rather than booksellers or the general public. This is particularly challenging since you will need to present a different interpretation of what may be already well-documented facts.
So, what are the difficulties involved in researching someone's life?
Well, the main worry is organisation, although getting funding and especially time are also big concerns. You've got to plan or you'll never succeed. As soon as you can, create digital files of different periods of their life and, even before that, make a timeline. It's amazing how difficult it is to keep events in order. Finally, sort out any hard copy into similar periods.
Hard copy? Do you mean other biographies, history books and the like?
No, sorry. This can mean books, of course, but also things such as letters, diaries, especially those if there are any, photographs, newspaper clippings, and so on. It may be accompanied by transcripts of interviews with people who knew your subject.
Ah, I imagine that's very exciting.
It can be, yes, but it's also tricky. You'd expect interviewees to feel excited too, or enthusiastic, yet they're actually often very reserved initially, becoming friendlier later. They may not like being recorded and so won't say much during the official interview. You need to be prepared for what they may say afterwards once they relax. Then they often come out with the really interesting tidbits. It's vital to show them respect for their feelings and also gratitude for their time. Remember, you may need to come back to them for more information or to corroborate another person's testimony. It can be a long process.
So what's special about your work then, Penelope?
There's something wonderful about entering the world of an historical great. You know, like Napoleon, Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan. For a while, you are privy to part of the power these great leaders and politicians wielded, and that can be awe-inspiring. Another aspect is the thrill of the chase, as it were. It's almost like you're a detective hunting an elusive suspect, especially when you don't know if he's guilty or not. You might suddenly uncover information about him that completely changes your view and forces you to follow another line of research altogether. I get a real buzz out of that.
Penelope Fowles, fascinating. Thank you.
.2 Uprising. Employer. Employee. Reliable. Evacuee. .3 Assassinate. Editor. Engineer. Industry. Portrayal. Reflection. Refugee. Scholarship. Validity. Vietnamese. .1
With me to discuss the news in the Sunday papers today are Araminta Knowles, MP, Marie Brunn, journalist for the World Tribune, and Roy Vince, novelist. So, Marie, what caught your eye this week?
Well, Ewan, one of the biggest stories was the arrest of Liam Dagar, the alleged drug lord. The authorities are hailing this as a major step forward in the fight against crime. I'm not so convinced.
But it's great news, isn't it? Especially as there have been rumours that some politicians had also got their hands dirty in supporting this evil trade.
Allegedly.
Yes, but I question the government's motives here, Araminta. Elections are coming up. They want to convince people they're taking a strong stand.
That's quite a cynical view, isn't it? If politicians really were involved in supporting Degas, surely they'd want to cover it up, especially as he's such a high-profile figure.
Oh, his reputation was already on the wane, Roy. Degas was just one small link in the chain. The arrest is of little significance as a crime-fighting gesture, because his second-in-command will simply take over.
I think you're underestimating the power he's wielded for the last 10 years. No, I'm looking forward to the positive impact this will have.
Definitely a story worth following. Thanks, Marie. Now, Araminta, you've got something of a very different nature to tell us about, haven't you?
Very good. Yes. I was pleased to read that the American author Richard Louv is currently in Britain raising awareness of what he calls the nature deficit disorder.
This disorder, is it some kind of disease?
Not as such, but it's nevertheless a growing problem in today's society. Louv contends that urban parents are turning kids away from the outdoors, which is having a highly detrimental effect.
It affects their performance at school, and it could even be a factor in the rise in attention deficit disorder.
Well, OK, but isn't he overemphasising a point here? I mean, there are parks, school trips. Access to nature isn't that limited, surely.
I think Louv's got a point. Most parks are largely glorified dog exercising areas with a bit of grass and a few trees if you're lucky. If kids learn anything about nature, they do it in class or on a screen. In other words, indoors. No, something should be done.
What concerns me, Marie, is the nanny state culture at work here. We've become a paranoid society that won't let children outside to play because of the often over-exaggerated or even imaginary risks.
With respect, I think you're out of touch here, Araminta. That might have been true a few years ago, but things have moved on since then. People are a lot more health conscious, and you see many more families walking or riding bikes now.
Oh, goodness. Where do you live, Roy? I can't believe it's very typical.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Araminta, but we're running out of time. I'd like us to cover one more story before the news break. Roy.
Yeah, thanks, Ewan. Well, I'd like to look at the breaking news about the offshore oil disaster, which has polluted the seas in the Atlantic. I can't believe nothing.
13.2 1.
Dealt. Deal.
2.
Natural. Nature.
3.
Society. Social.
4.
Risen. Rise.
5.
Legislation. Legislature.
6.
Advertising. Advertisement.
7.
Station. Statute.
14.1
Good evening, everyone. It's good to see such a large turnout. Clearly, the entrepreneurial spirit is alive and well, despite the current economic situation. Now, the first question I have to ask, or rather, the question you have to ask yourselves is, why are you starting a company? If it's because you've carried out a great deal of research and you've spotted a gap in the market for your product or service, then go ahead. Do it. If, on the other hand, you're fed up with long hours and you want to free up more time for the kids, think again. A new company will put even greater demands on your time. Likewise, if you're fed up taking orders from other people, I'd also advise caution. Power-hungry CEOs often struggle to take off. The same goes if profit is all that motivates you. Margins will be low at the start, so you'll probably make very little initially. But if you have a genuine fascination with whatever you're selling, then go for it. Now, some of you here might be thinking about having your second go at business because your first attempt was short-lived. Take heart. Some of the world's top entrepreneurs have done exactly the same thing. You can learn a lot from past mistakes. A word of warning, though, never try to get a new company going while you're still employed elsewhere. I'll tell you why. If you see your business as a backup plan or a compensation for your boring regular work, you'll never commit yourself 100%. And no, your new business won't be successful. It's all or nothing. So what you need to do in these circumstances...
14.2
It's just as important to know why businesses fail as why they thrive. Many failures occur when entrepreneurs lack sufficient management knowledge. They might be good at dealing with customers, but they lack expertise in handling hard-to-manage employees as well as in financial matters. The next reason, and you won't believe how often this occurs, but many people have no real idea about how much capital they need. Putting in long hours won't necessarily help you if you sink too far into debt. So you really need to be realistic about this. People's failure to consider location can also lead to bankruptcy. They haven't thought about how accessible the store or office is, or how close they are to competitors. So don't just choose a location because it doesn't need much renovation, or because it's close to suppliers or your home. Now, most businesses these days have the sense to set up a website with opening hours, addresses and so on. So why do some forget to put up a catalogue too? If customers can't find one of these, they'll soon look elsewhere. And when times are tough, worry less about promoting your luxury products and services and more about highlighting your discounts. You'll keep your income up that way. Remember, entrepreneurs who overcharge their customers never see them again. The final point that I'm going to make is that rather than focusing on short-term business, you want to encourage repeat business. That's the way to make your company grow.
.3 1.
So how's the family? Tell me all.
2.
What are you up to this weekend? I thought you were going camping.
3.
So, did you go out? Only I didn't see you.
4.
Did you catch the news this morning? I couldn't believe it.
5.
Where are you going for your holiday? I can't remember if Claire said Greece or Italy.
6.
What are you doing this evening? I fancy going out.
7.
How's the house coming along? I'd love to see it.
15.1. Speaker 1.
There's a definite trend for boys to be more flamboyant in what they wear. I love it. The mainstream doesn't have to be bland. Sometimes it's very exciting. In Tokyo, a lot of men, even older men, have started wearing long skirts or shorter skirts over leggings, like the girls. This is possibly more readily acceptable in Japan, since there's a historical precedent for men to wear robes called yukata. These are also making a comeback, by the way. I try to make my clothes truly unisex, not male, not female, and it seems to be working, judging by the figures.
Speaker 2.
Yeah, well, we just can't cut it like the girls. We just don't get the recognition. So naturally, we don't get the remuneration either. I did an accessories shoot for a high street chain last month and got €1,000 for it. The girl I was working with, not even that high profile, took €12,000. That's just the way it is. That said, we guys have it a lot easier in many ways. It's definitely easier to model trousers than dresses or skimpy lingerie. Behind the scenes, male fashion is friendly rather than intimidating. OK, there are pressures at times, but it's generally fun.
Speaker 3.
Whenever I go back to India, I try to get to the craft fairs. An outfit is only totally finished when you've added the right shoes, bag, etc. A plain dress can be made into something special by putting a bold necklace with it. Eye-catching jewellery gets you noticed. Most high street shops sell only the same old well-known brands, and the designer labels are too pricey for my budget. The best Indian craft fairs often have innovative products from young designers, and you can sometimes find a bargain that makes you look like $1 million. I've picked up some exquisite pieces.
Speaker 4.
We produce grooming products for men as well as women, and while the market for the latter is definitely larger, our men's range has grown considerably over the last 2 to 3 years. Young men are generally keen consumers now, but admittedly they need a slightly different approach in the packaging and marketing. The words fashion and cosmetics sound feminine to most men, and so we use the less off-putting words style and grooming. We're now trying to target older men, 35 plus. That's our new target market.
Speaker 5. A lot of people are nervous about clothes shopping. Fashion can be unwelcoming, especially if you're a more curvaceous shape or some way past your teens. That's where the web is such a help. By downloading my ebook, users can discover where to find original and affordable items from designer or mainstream brands, or choose accessories which blend subtly with an outfit, and so on. Then they click on a link to find a store that sells their kind of clothes. I've been operating this service for 5 years now and haven't had a complaint yet. (15.2) 1.
You didn't like him then?
But I did, actually.
2.
So you liked the show?
No, I said I disliked the show.
3. You must have overslept.
No, you're early.
4.
So it's true, you were laughing at me.
No, I wasn't laughing. That's not true.
5. It's your turn to do the shopping.
No, it's not my turn. I did it yesterday.
6.
You must have seen her.
No, I can't have seen her. I wasn't there.
16.1. Extract 1.
So, how often do you get called out, Yatsek?
It varies. The majority of visitors have done their homework and have read up on the potential hazards. If you've got the right gear and clothing, you'll usually be fine, so these people rarely need my help. Then you'll get one who sees blue skies in the morning and thinks, right, I'll just go for a little climb. And up they go in their jeans and sweater with a little bottle of water, and it comes as a total shock when the clouds suddenly descend.
I bet they don't make the same mistake twice.
No, but you do get some strange reactions sometimes. There was one English tourist, he was extremely dehydrated, and he'd already got frostbite. The next step would have been hypothermia, and then... But unlike other people we've saved, who are usually very grateful and thrilled to be alive, this guy acted like we'd interfered or something, got in his way. At first we wondered if he was suffering from embarrassment. That's quite a common reaction. This guy was far from typical.
Extract 2.
In your latest novel, Geraldine, you've chosen a rather personal theme.
Yes, I've based it around the life of my grandparents and the tragedy of the war. After volunteering to fight, my grandfather was briefly sent home to get over a leg wound. During that time, he actually asked my grandmother whether she wanted to call the relationship off, but she wouldn't hear of it. And then my mother was conceived, and he was ordered back to his regiment, going with the knowledge he was to be a father. I think they naively thought the war would end and they'd soon be married, but it wasn't to be.
So your grandmother never saw him again?
Sadly, no. Eventually she heard he'd been killed. And there she was, pregnant and unmarried. There was enormous pressure on her to give the baby up for adoption, particularly from the men in her family. But she refused to give in. She shared my belief that you'll always be sorry for the chance you didn't take rather than the one you did. Too often people agonise over the possible consequences and let fear get in the way.
Extract 3.
Well, I'd been in R&D for going on 3 years, and the guys I'd started out with had moved up, but not me. They were earning more too, I reckon, although that wasn't so much of an issue for me. I wanted people to look up to me, to be someone, whatever that means. Then my sister lent me one of those assertiveness training DVDs.
Oh, yeah?
Well, it suggested that employers appreciate a direct approach. I was still unsure, but I thought I'd give it a go. I marched into the head of department's office and told her all about the kind of products the company should be developing and all my bright ideas for the future.
Sounds good.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? The thing is, once I'd stopped blabbing, I realised she was staring at me, sort of amused, or maybe it was in confusion. And when I was expecting thanks or encouragement, there was just this silence. I felt this big, I tell you. Eventually, I stumbled back to my desk and kept my head down for the rest of the day.
.2 1.
They've come with the right gear.
2.
Wait, I'll just catch my breath.
3.
The next step could have been fatal.
Quite.
4.
We're leaving on the 1st of March.
5.
He was sent home to get over a leg wound.
6.
I remember quite clearly. I left it there.